Hey, welcome to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my half-hourly slot every Friday. It's good to be back. It's real nice. I'm from Pahiatua, and hang on a sec. I'm from Pahiatua, and I have to drive in every day from there, and it's a great drive through. I go past Mount Bruce, the last little decent pocket of bush that's still there where they produce miracles, breed kiwis and saddlebacks and all kinds of birds that they introduce. A wonderful place to visit, and of course I always have to go past the Tararuas. It's great to see them with a little bit of snow on the tops. There's just a few flecks today, and I go over the Ruamahanga. I always like to take a glance down the bridge at that magnificent river. It's a great little sight to see. You know, there are so many wonderful places in the Wairarapa to see. It really is quite something, and I really look forward to it. I didn't see any hawks today. My record so far is 24 in one morning in an hour. So, I mean, you know, when the wind gets up, they love flying, and to me, they're a true symbol of freedom. I'd love to see them, and you know, it's an auspicious thing to see those little buggers flying about. Well, my show is about depression, and I have suffered from depression for many years myself. And the thing about depression is that every single person on Earth, some 3.5 billion of us now, every single person thinks a different thought at any given second, at any given time. We are individuals, and that means that the experience is different for everybody. So there is no simple, quick, easy fix. There is no simple solution. But when I first moved to Pahiatua, I did it real tough. I was isolated for a few years, and I basically stopped communicating and stopped going out and stopped doing everything, and toughed it out. And those were very, very tough times. They nearly cost me my life a couple of times, and it's not really a good way to go. Toughing it out is it's the Kiwi thing to do, it's the male thing to do, but really what you've got to do is you've got to communicate, you've got to talk, tell your friends, tell your doctor, get some decent medicine, get some decent sleep and food. Those are the basics. Those are the place to start. And from there, any little thing you can do, even a walk in the park, it's amazing what a bit of fresh air and a bit of sunshine can do. Go down to a river. They're sacred, holy places, healing places. Go down, have a smoke, watch the river go by. Clean up your house. I did that recently. I spent 9 solid days knocking my place into shape, and every time I'm in my house now, it just lifts my spirits and makes me feel that much better. So just those little things. And you've got to realise it's going to take as long as it takes to recover, and that could be a very long time, but you've just got to take it easy and be gentle with yourself and realise that you've got to look after yourself and take the time. You know, I met a lot of amazing people along the way. I'd like to say a special thanks to Aruna Patel. Thank you very much, Aruna. You're an amazing lady. Also, Michael and Veronica down here at Arrow Radio. They do a great job here, and they've been very, very kind to me, allowing me to do the show without a sponsor. So if you do know of anyone that wants to sponsor a show, give Michael or Veronica down at Arrow a ring, and we'll sort it out. And it's cheap. It's a great form of advertising. And really, you know, I would encourage people to get involved, with Arrow, to listen to it. It's something really different, and I believe that it's the future of news and how we relate to each other, because honestly, national news is just rubbish. It really is. It doesn't tell you much. It's not very informative. It's basically pretty revolting, just titillation for the masses. So things like Arrow, far more interesting, learning about different walks of life, other people. It really is an interesting thing. So we're on TV now, on radio. You can look us up on the website. There are podcasts from the previous recorded shows, so you can catch up at any time at your own convenience through the wonders of modern technology. Very worthwhile. A big thanks also to all the rest of my friends. Thank you very much for being part of my life and making my life special. All right, on with today's show. That's what I do. I've written quite a few short stories of different places I've been. This particular one is about Africa, the Kalahari and the Chobe. I spent 2.5 years in Africa, and amazing experience. I really didn't want to leave, but there were more adventures to be had, and I had to move on, and I ended up in London and touring Europe. But this is a nice piece of reminiscence. This is a wonderful trip we had through Africa. This is the Kalahari and the Chobe River. 4 of us struck out north from Pretoria, South Africa. We headed for the thirsty land of the Kalahari. Seedy, Wayne, Dave and myself had bought a car in Johannesburg and were driving up to the Chobe River on the far side of the Kalahari Desert. We planned to drive the length of the Kalahari to one of the 3 great river systems in the north. Our aim was the Chobe National Game Park in Botswana. Our first day's drive from Pretoria was a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. At first there was the reassurance of farms and horticulture made possible with irrigation. South Africa, for all of its shortcomings, still had well-organised systems in place which made life possible in tremendous heat. When the Dutch first crossed this place, they named them the Thirsty Lands. Driving over the border from South Africa to southern Botswana was like day to night. Suddenly the desert proper began looking reminiscent of the Australian outback. A large straight motorway led us into sandy, rather barren lands that had not seen rain or water in a long time. Occasionally the motorway opened out and doubled up as a landing strip for planes. There was very little game around as a result of little foliage. The little we saw in our travels looked half-starved. We planned to spend as little time as possible in the southern parched lands and head for the promise the northern rivers provided. There are 3 great river systems in the north. The Okavango, which starts life in the Angolan heights and floods erratically through northern Botswana. Secondly, the Kuando River starts in Namibia and again erratically floods marshlands until it becomes the Chobe River system in Botswana. The Chobe then meets the mighty Zambezi, which flows down from Zambia, and they become the amazing Victoria Falls on the Zambia-Zimbabwe border. We were heading to the middle river system, where it turns into the Chobe River in a well-established national park. It boasts some of the greatest concentrations of game anywhere in Africa. The water and grasslands attract hundreds of thousands of wildebeest and zebra, along with gazelles, kudu and impala, giraffe and so on. They in turn attract lions, leopards, cheetahs and hyena. The most impressive of all, however, are the tens of thousands of elephants this good grazing attracts. But before we reached the grassy north, we had to battle through the parched south. We pulled into a small town in the middle of nowhere after trying a shortcut which resulted in some damage to the car. While refuelling and getting repairs done, we stopped for a Coke and were mobbed by about 100 local kids. We were told most of them had never seen a white man, and they delighted in pinching the hair on our arms to make sure we were real. The children were full of life and very clean considering the lack of water. But we pushed on hard north, driving from dawn till after dark, and managed to spend only a few nights in the desert, camping where and when we had to. After stopping in another nowhere town, Seedy decided to rattle off a few photographs. Unfortunately, he accidentally photographed mud huts surrounded by razor wire with a sign saying military installation on it. Before long, a jeep turned up on the scene, and at first the boys in the back holding AK-47s were all smiles for the camera. Suddenly, however, the sergeant took exception to what we were doing and angrily demanded to see our film. Smiles suddenly turned into frowns, and suddenly we were facing 4 loaded AK-47s. At first sight he tried to argue with the sergeant, but as things escalated, changed his mind and handed over the camera. The ignorant sergeant then exposed the film to sunlight, then rolled it up and took our details, promising to return it once checked. This at least diffused the scary situation, and the privates shouldered their weapons. Life is cheap in Africa, and I truly feared for our lives for a few minutes. We couldn't get out of town fast enough, and it was good to get back on the road north. After a few more days of motoring through the desert, we finally started to see some green trees and increased amount of scrub and life. Then one day I came round a corner, and all of a sudden 3 elephants were wandering across the motorway, blocking our way. For a few seconds I was too stunned to do anything as these massive animals ambled along. This was our first introduction to the Chobe area, and stunned us all to see these great creatures wandering free in the open. Before long we reached the game park proper, and were surprised to see how little infrastructure there was to the place. There were a few safari-style places set up, but other than that, no real camps as such. We simply paid to enter and were free to set up camp anywhere we could. Upon entering the game park, we were blown away by the incredible amounts of life everywhere. Hundreds of species of birds, zebra and wildebeest in their countless thousands, antelope like gazelle, the huge impala and the impressive kudu with its corkscrew horns, all of them in massive numbers. Many other game like giraffes and hippos were also common along the river. But the most impressive of all was the vast numbers of elephants wandering freely. All of these animals in turn attracted huge numbers of predators like lions, cheetahs, leopards and hyenas. Alrighty, well, we'll take a little bit of a break there and I will play you something from Split Enz. A little bit unusual, you might not have heard this version, but I reckon it's pretty good. See what you think.
Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants the same thing. To see another birthday. Look at all the pretty numbers. Look at all the pretty numbers scattered on the calendars. I can see my reflection. I can see my reflection in the shop window. That space, declare it if you dare tonight. Let the moment pass till another day. Bright lights disappear. all the trash and the treasure, all the trash and the treasure, all the pain and the pleasure. Taste the edible flowers, taste the edible flowers, scattered in the salad days. Who wants that space? Declare it if you dare tonight. Don't let the moment pass until another day. Bright lights dissolve like sugar deep inside you now. Still the rain keeps coming down. I'm hardly here at all. Everything's gone quiet now. I'm hardly here at all.
Welcome back to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. Bright lights dissolve like sugar deep inside you now. Yeah, beautiful words. Still the rain keeps coming down, I'm hardly here at all. Yeah, a lot of people do suffer from depression. It's amazing how many. Alright, well, time is marching on, so I'm going to crack on with the story. Let's go. On our first day on the Chobe National Game Park, we met up with some hunters who told us they were culling elephants. The numbers were too great to sustain, and they were devastating the bush habitat. They were culling whole family units at a time, so as to cause as little disruption as possible. We found it hard to believe such wholesale slaughter was necessary, although the explanation was compelling. On the river itself, we saw elephants to the red horizon. Nothing could have prepared us for that magnificent sight. As the sun slowly lowered red to the horizon, the elephants came down to bathe. Even the grumpy hippo were forced off the best parts of the river. The elephants truly revel joyously in this time. They play with their young, free in their great numbers from any predator. Instead, the lions lie hidden in the long grasses, waiting patiently for an opportunity of easier prey. Life on the river runs like clockwork, and each animal that needs water has its turn. On our first day on the Chobe River, we caught the last half of the day. We found a flat patch of grass at around lunchtime. We were immediately robbed of biscuits by monkeys when we stopped for a feed. Dozens of baboons descended on the scene after the monkeys, and we quickly learned to leave nothing for the robbers to have. The male baboons were particularly large and intimidating, with huge fangs and showing little fear of man. The best way to spot game was from the relative safety of the car, so after setting up our tents we set off on the unsealed sandy bumpy roads. I was the designated driver by now, and the roads were sorely testing. I quickly learned the most dangerous time was driving through a family group of elephants. The young ones, ranging from 1 to 2 tonne, would suddenly charge head first towards us. These mock charges were truly frightening, and the only way to stop them is to plant boot and charge at them. The dust and the roar of the engine puts them off, but I had to be careful not to hit them, as 4-tonne Mum was always looking on. The large bull elephants, however, must be avoided at all costs. They are short-tempered, huge, and run surprisingly quickly. We watched them bulldoze whole trees down and strip them of all leaves. The amount of devastation they caused was unbelievable. After spending the afternoon game spotting, we returned to camp to cook tea. As we cooked up what we had on the riverside camp, a family of warthogs came trotting past us and into their burrows in the riverbed. The water flowed quickly at this point, so there were no crocodiles about. All the same, I felt very vulnerable in our makeshift camp. I didn't sleep at all well, and at about 2 a.m. something came sniffing at my head. With only a millimetre of plastic between us, I was frozen with fear. The creature then moved off, and I fell into a whiskey-induced sleep. I woke at the dawn chorus of birds and general wildlife. I poked my head out of the tent to watch our warthog neighbours trot past on their way out. The 4 of us headed out after breakfast. We spent all day driving around game spotting, and before long Dave spotted a lioness in the long grass. I stopped and hopped out for a better look, but could not see her. I walked forward, but did not see her until she blinked. By then it became suddenly obvious that she could run me down, so I slowly backed up without unlocking eye contact. It was the first and last time I made that mistake in Africa. We had a great day game spotting, with loads of beautiful antelope to watch, along with any big cats that might be following. The middle of the day was too hot, however, for the cats, and the game was left to graze in freedom. Generally speaking, only the young and the very old are most vulnerable, as they are culled from the herd most often. We headed back to camp for tea and sunset. A huge number of elephants came down to the river each sunset for a bathe and turned on a show. Our campsite was perfectly elevated for viewing up the river with binoculars. The sight of at least 100 animals in the lenses was something no zoo or wildlife centre could prepare us for. Slowly, as I got more used to being surrounded by wildlife, the adventure became more enjoyable. We clicked into a routine of getting up at dawn and driving around game spotting each day. We soon learned the best spots near our camp, and no 2 days were ever quite the same. One hot afternoon, we were watching a huge bull elephant bulldoze down trees. He had a particularly huge set of tusks and made for some great photographs. Suddenly Wayne decided he needed a good close-up and jumped out of the car and approached the huge beast. The elephant suddenly turned his attentions from the tree he was eating to Wayne. The bull stamped his foot and flared his great ears in warning, but Wayne remained oblivious, happily snapping off some great shots. The bull then trumpeted, stamped its huge foot, and it was all too late for Wayne as he began to charge. "I'm out of here," I shouted to Wayne, and turned away, planting boot as I went. Wayne made a sudden sprint for the car and managed to dive head first through the open passenger side window as I spun the wheel. As I roared off, my foot flat to the floor, all I could see was the huge elephant's head in the rear vision mirror. I could feel the ground shaking as he charged after us. Luckily I had just enough power to outsprint the bull and slowly pull away from him, with Wayne hanging halfway out the window. Far too close for comfort. After that incident, we made sure not to push our luck too much, as these animals were truly wild and had little fear of man. At one point the road was blocked by a troop of baboons, with one particularly belligerent male that parked himself in the middle. I got out to shoo him away, only to come darting back in as he screamed and charged at me. We soon learned not to underestimate any of the wildlife about. Living conditions were the most basic at our makeshift camps. The river water was unusable because of bilharzia, a nasty waterborne parasite that destroys the liver and has no cure. We were also limited by our food stores, which had to be rationed carefully. Luckily enough, there were no more incidents at camp, so we were able to adapt to the routine of the river. Each morning our warthog neighbours would parade past us at dawn as we made breakfast. We spent each day trying to spot new species as well as our favourites. The giraffe were always fun to watch, as they looked so awkward as they stooped knock-kneed to drink. Although ungainly to look at, they made for great watching as they grazed high up in the trees. Pretty much every species had some impressive attribute, from the grace of the antelope to the stealth of their predators, to the massive horned water buffalo, the ugly-looking wildebeest, the beautiful zebra, and all the other grazers. The most impressive of all, however, were the massive elephants with their huge tusks and trunks. To my mind at least, they were the kings of the jungle. Despite the hardships we had to endure, our time at Chombe was over all too soon. But I feel we left a little piece of ourselves there, and we took a little of that place with us. I look back on those days wistfully now, and I'm sure the 3 guys I travelled with feel the same. The end. Wow, look at that. Oh, a minute to spare. Snuck it in. It's good to do things on time and be timely. And, Africa was an amazing place. In some ways I wish I could go back, but I think deep down I know I never will. It was great to do it as a young man because, it is a dangerous, rugged place. It's pretty crazy. And, it's dangerous, wild, but truly amazing. And I just wish that every young person in New Zealand had an opportunity to go and see it for themselves. Absolutely incredible, and gave me quite a few great stories. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in. Tell other people about it and say, hey, look, something good going on here. You want to check it out. All right. We'll catch you next week, and if you know anyone who's suffering from depression, be that difference maker, and you never know, you just might save a life. Thanks for now. Catch you next week. Bye-bye.